As we all know, after many years of trying and many years of different dramas and conflict with the SEC, we finally got the approval of an ETF on January 10th. Now, what does that mean to the market? What are the repercussions that this one single milestone may have for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies? These are the things we're going to be covering in today's video. After all, it was not an easy battle, but in the end, the SEC have approved an ETF. And the video today, I want to disclose to you guys what is my view on the ETF. I also want to cover a little bit of the history on how we got here and how this milestone may affect the market from now onwards. Without any further ado, let's get straight into the video today. Now, we all know that after the approval, Bitcoin price went to 49,000. Now, what also was there is that the market anticipated the approval, and a lot of the price performance from 25 to 40,000 was because of the anticipation of this one single event, which is the approval of the ETF. Now, given the entire history of drama, controversies, and lawsuits, I'm not surprised that just the last 30 hours before the approval, it was filled with even more drama. The SEC Twitter account was hacked. There was fake announcements of the approval and so on. Also, the website of the SEC went down prior to the approval, so it was no surprise that those events would happen just 30 hours before the approval of the ETF. But in the end, it got approved. However, Gary Gensler made very clear that he approved this against his will. I honestly believe that Gary Gensler only approved the ETF to save his job or because he'll run out on excuses not to approve. However, he also made very clear that Bitcoin ETF being approved does not guarantee any approval of any other ETF. And as of now, we are ready on expectations of the approval of the Ethereum ETF. Now, some of the arguments that Gary Gensler had was the volatility of the asset, the risks that the asset has, and what would it mean to have the ETF approved. In his view, the approval of the ETF would put Bitcoin in a different category of asset, and I kind of agree with him on that. Now, historically speaking, the resistance or the reasons that the SEC and Gary Gensler did not approve the ETF sooner, I kind of agree with those. The asset is very volatile. There's a lot of market manipulation. There's a lot of risks involved with this. And the approval of the ETF would mean that the asset is free from risks or the same category as any other asset such as gold. The truth is, it's a new category of asset. And I do agree with the SEC in the sense that the approval of this ETF would put Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies in another category. Now, the arguments the SEC had was not unfounded or was not without a reason. However, the crypto space pushed back, believing that the views were too conservative, and there were also views where Bitcoin became villainized or blamed as the instrument used by criminals. The truth is, in my view, Bitcoin is also a new technology, and as most new technology, they are often used first by criminals. This was true for the automobile, this was true for the cell phones, this was true also for the internet, and so on. Historically speaking, on this conflict between financial institutions wanting to be able to have a Bitcoin ETF and the SEC pushing back, we have one turning point, which was the Grayscale. Now, even though we're all talking about BlackRock ETF, we must not forget Grayscale. Grayscale was the pioneer company. Grayscale was the company that applied first, got many rejections, and sued the SEC, and eventually got a ruling on their favor. And that ruling on the favor of Grayscale was the landmark that turned the game, that made the world of crypto or the enthusiasts of crypto to believe that eventually an ETF approval was going to be possible. At least those are my thoughts when I look at this history. Grayscale to me was the one that managed to turn the table and give us hope that ETF will be approved. And of course, later on, BlackRock, one of the largest managing asset company in the world, applied. And at that point, we felt, okay, the ETF will be approved. But the battle, in my view, began with Grayscale. Grayscale is the pioneer on that game. Now, another box of surprises in this entire history was Gary Gensler. A lot of people in the crypto space, I remember when Gary Gensler got approved, they thought, okay, the head of the SEC is going to be someone who taught blockchain, Bitcoin at universities. He's going to be pro-crypto and things are going to be easier. And nothing could be further from the truth. Gary Gensler was by far one of the persons that could not be more opposing to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies than any other head of the SEC. That was something that added more to the drama and the controversies of the crypto space towards the approval of this ETF. Now, towards the end of 2023, we saw the peculiarities getting increased. the approval could be no different in this whole history of drama. Towards the end of the year, we saw some NASDAQ ticker being leaked and the optimism or the expectation of the approval already being there, and the price start to go up. And eventually, on January 10th, the approval became official, and now we all have the ETF, and the price of Bitcoin went as high as 49K over the optimism. And of course, as you already know, the price also dropped all the way to 39,000 after the approval, which in my view suggests that the market was way over optimistic about the approval, believing that the ETF would be the new iPhone, meaning the financial institutions were desperate to buy an ETF, and as soon as it would be approved, there will be this flood of capital coming to Bitcoin or coming into the Bitcoin ETFs, trying to purchase more spot Bitcoin ETFs. And that was not so, as we saw the price performance all the way to 49K and then collapsing to 39. And as I shoot this video, the price is back just above $40,000. Now, with the approval of the Bitcoin ETF, what other implications are there besides the extra purchasing power, besides the actual buying pressure, or besides the actual liquidity that's coming to the market and possibly boosting the price? Besides the price, there's a few things that I want to say that I like about this ETF. First of all, there is a role for a Bitcoin ETF, not for an individual, but for companies and financial institutions. I do agree that there is a reason for having a Bitcoin ETF in certain cases. Again, not for individual. Now, I also like that this ETF is being handled by large companies that are reputable in the space. Also, the custody of the Bitcoin are going to be held by Coinbase custody and Fidelity. Now, another thing that I do like, which is a greatest implication to me about this approval, is that now the dialogue changed. When I talk to people about Bitcoin right now, I have a rebuttal, I have something to say to them in terms of not being just used by scammers. Once the ETF is approved, it changed the dialogue, it changed the conversation. I can talk about Bitcoin because there's an ETF being approved, which gives certain degree of legitimacy that I can use on a conversation and use when I'm talking about Bitcoin. Now, that to me is a very significant implication, because until the approval of the ETF, whenever I talk about Bitcoin, the conversation was not pleasant. A lot of people say, oh, nobody knows who Satoshi Nakamoto, or Bitcoin is just being used by criminals, institutions are against it, regulators are against it. But now that the ETF have been approved, it changed the conversation, it changed the dialogue, and it's easier for me to talk about Bitcoin without being automatically labeled a criminal. Now, those are the implications for me as an individual and for other Bitcoiners enthusiasts. Now, what also changes the perspective of the regulators. The regulators now, with the approval of the ETF, are going to have to balance how to defend their investors, but also how to make regulation that does not totally stifle innovation. Bitcoin, after all, is innovation. And if you want to find out more about this, consider joining our academy, because we explain there how this new innovation can really change the world. Now, the negative implication of this ETF is that those institutions are not going to be the owners of the Bitcoin, neither the ones that are selling the ETF nor the ones buying the ETF. It is important to understand that when you buy an ETF, you are not buying Bitcoin and you are not a Bitcoiner, because if you buy an ETF, what it means that you have now a speculative instrument, an instrument that allows you to speculate on the price of Bitcoin. No ETF is I owe you Bitcoin. All ETF is a document that says I owe you approximately the fiat value of the Bitcoin. The only thing you can get in exchange for that ETF is the fiat value of Bitcoin, not Bitcoin. The Bitcoin for the ETFs are not going to be held by the companies that are selling the ETF. They're going to be held by a custodian company. So no one that buys an ETF can consider themselves to be a Bitcoiner, because they would never have one single Satoshi in exchange for that ETF. I think that's a very important thing for everyone to understand. And this is the problem that most crypto enthusiasts or Bitcoiners have with the ETF, because it may give the idea to people that are buying ETFs that they're buying Bitcoin. There's no chance that that ETF will ever be a Bitcoin. The only way for that ETF to be a Bitcoin is if you sell it, get the fiat value, and find another way to buy Bitcoin, because now you have the fiat value available to you. So that is something that I think is important to be able to distinguish. And I do not think that everyone who buys an ETF fully understands that they're not buying a Bitcoin. They're just buying a speculative instrument that allows them to speculate on the fiat value of that Bitcoin. And of course, because of that, the crypto enthusiasts or Bitcoin enthusiasts do not like the ETF, because after all, Bitcoin was created so that you could be the custodian and there be no intermediary between you and your asset. And that's why I believe ETFs are great for certain particular cases for companies and financial institutions, but they're not great for the individual. I cannot see any circumstance where an individual person needs to have an ETF. At least those are my thoughts. If you have ideas contrary to mine, please let me know that on the comments below. My concluding thoughts, my closing thoughts are this. The ETF approval is something very positive. It gives an opportunity for some institutions and companies to be able to take part in the market. And I do like the way that it's being done. Also, like I said, it changed the narrative. It makes it easier for us to talk about Bitcoin, and it's no longer being labeled this thing that's only being used by criminals or has no legitimacy whatsoever. However, this approval does not only bring positive things. This approval has its own set of challenges. And in my view, the main challenge is the distinction between an ETF and owning Bitcoin. And I think for that, we require more education. But again, because the ETF has been approved, it makes it easier for us even to promote education towards Bitcoin. So overall, to me, this was a very positive event. However, it brings its own challenges and requires more education for people to enter the space safely and securely. At least those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Let me know that on the comments below. And if you're looking for ways to enter this space more safely, more securely, please consider contacting us or join the Academy. Link for that on the description below. That's it for now. See you guys in the next video. Kaboom. Goodbye.